Welcome to the 3D Disciples podcast, where we're working together to develop disciples who display God's love as we deploy into God's world. I'm your host, Hannah, and with me today, as always, is the pastor of FBC Clarion, Jason Hunter. Let's hit the trail running. So let's get back to the muddy boots that you had at our recording session the other night, and also the notable fact that you were wearing them at a recent sermon, which you called me out on. Why were you wearing those boots?
Well, that's, first of all, one of our icons, our little mountain climbers, remind us that we're on this journey, and it's not a leisurely stroll, it's a hike. So, the idea of the way is difficult. And so just to kind of remind us that what we're doing is not, being a disciple is not just pie in the sky kind of thing. That it's a challenge.
Mm-hmm. So the boots go back to one of the 3Ds, which is develop.
Right.
Okay, so that's kind of what we're going to be discussing today. And I looked back in the Bible in Proverbs 1:7, and I noticed that the Bible isn't shy to tell the truth. So here's what it says. It says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction." How would you, Jason, say like this verse, or maybe somewhere else in the Bible, basically says that we can't just coast through life as a saved Christian?
Well, I think right there, the fear of the Lord is just kind of reverence, as how that is. And so, but I think the overarching just kind of look at anyone who dealt with God in the Bible. I mean,
there's no coasting.
Find me one person who just kind of kicked back in the lazy boy and just coasted. I mean, there's not a single one of them that didn't face significant challenges in their lives. Mm-hmm. And that this fear of the Lord, right? That He's God, He's Almighty. They're revering Him. They're reverent to Him. Mm-hmm. Made them do crazy things, willing to do amazing things when He called them to do it. Pick one. Noah building an ark. That wasn't difficult. David, slaying Goliath. Moses leading the Hebrew children. Abraham going to wherever God would lead him to. Joseph in Potiphar, in Potiphar's house, or in the land of Egypt. And I mean, just and pick any of the prophets, even Jesus points out they were all killed and murdered, and so every story, and then start with Jesus and the disciples and Paul and Timothy and James and all these guys. If you follow the Lord, it's there's no coasting. It's not a coasting thing. It's a challenge. And in Hebrews 11, that's probably, it's called the Hall of Fame of Faith, and it talks about all these people. And there's a verse, and I'm going to butcher it.
I just read it last night, so maybe I'll help you.
Okay, but it's like they were sawn in two, they were boiled. That it talks about all these things and how God honored them, and it just proved that they had faith in God, and that I think it even says something to the earth wasn't worthy of them because they were just so sold out to following God no matter what. Yeah. And so I think that's really it.
So basically, to answer the question, just read your stories in the Bible.
Yeah, well, I mean, you find somebody who had it easy, and I'm going to say they're probably not fearing the Lord.
Yeah. Even like Nebuchadnezzar. I mean, he had to learn a hard way to who God is. Okay, so another thing is I should honestly repent daily about how I need to control things. Like, I like how my breakfast is prepared. I like to know how much money is in my account and how much gets taken out. And something you talked about in the sermon was letting God direct our lives comes down to relinquishing control. And so I'm just asking on a personal level, like, how can I learn to let God control?
Well, it's funny, some of the stuff we even talk about before we start recording. So it's kind of the same thing, pray for patience.
Oh,
pray for patience, and God will give you some trial. Pray for the relinquishing of control. I don't know what God will do with that, but I think part of it's just really coming down to some the deeper questions. Why do I have control? There's a study I do it's called Call to Obedience. It's a discipleship program that I went through a couple of years ago, and I have a mentor in that, and I actually talked with him today about how we're going to use some of the content from that discipleship, and we're going to use it as resources for 3D discipleship. And so I was talking to him today about that. But one of the main lessons in that is that he teaches that the root cause of all sin is pride. And pride is controlling my world. Like, I can't trust anybody else. I can't trust God. I can't trust, and it's all about this root cause of pride. And who do I trust? Who's going to be in charge? And when things don't go the way I want them to, can I trust the person who's in charge? I mean, so that all kind of fits together in some kind of weird way. And so really control is just is a deeper issue about either lack of trust or pride. I'm relying on myself. And the way he defines pride is doubt of God and reliance on self. So if I can't trust God, and if I doubt God's good, if I doubt God can handle it, if I doubt God will handle it, then I've got to take control of myself. Yeah. And so that's really the heart of it.
Yeah. And like one of the metaphors you were using in the sermon was about the potter and the clay. I'm supposed to be the clay on the spinning wheel. There's no way that I could control how fast it's going or what I'm going to turn into. So that was helpful, just so you know.
Praise the Lord.
Also, another funny thing I've noticed over the last few years is the visions that we've been working towards. Like in 2021, they've all connected. Sorry. In 2021, we were trying to look for our one to disciple. And then in 2022 was about being one, or AKA a disciple. And then in 2023, it's about being a 3D disciple. So, but in the 2022, I took notes during one of your sermons where you were showing a graphic that had like 4 islands and 3 bridges that connected. And the last island was the land of discipleship. Do you remember that graphic at all?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Okay. I have it like in my Bible here.
That's scary, by the way, the fact that you copied down my slideshow in the back of your Bible.
Real quick. I had lots of colored pens. It was fun. Just to describe to the listeners, that graphic had the 4 islands, which was the land of death, and the bridge that connects to the next island as believers would be Jesus. The next bridge is the Bible, which connects you to the nominal Christian island. And then the third bridge, which is the cost bridge, takes you to the land of discipleship. So it's taking me over a year to get to the point where I'm ready to take that bridge that's the cost to the land of discipleship. Is that okay that like it's taken me a while to be comfortable with the uncomfortable?
What? A whole year?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
No, I think that's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
I think God works with us at our own pace. I think one of the mistakes we make as a church, as Christians sometimes, is I think we should tell people and expect God to work in people's lives and to change them. I think we need to be very careful when we determine the timetable of that change and what those changes are going to be.
Yeah.
And so I think I'd rather somebody take time and it be solid than to just go really fast and it not be solid.
Yeah.
I actually was counseling a person one time, and we actually took one verse. We had one verse, and for almost a year we worked on one verse.
1 year.
1 year, one verse. 1 year, one verse.
Oh my gosh.
And it was a husband.
Yeah.
And he was struggling with all his relationships with his family. And so we took Ephesians 5:25, husbands, love your wife as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. And so week after week, every time he would come to me, we're like, well, this is what happened this week. I'm like, well, let's talk about this verse. How did you love your wife and sacrifice for her the way Christ did to the church in this situation? And the next week, same thing. And literally it was almost a year of just like, let's just take this one verse and really get that down.
Yeah.
I have shifted in my thinking quite a bit in that area. There's a lot of people who are jazzed up about reading the Bible in a year and all that kind of stuff, and they kind of plow through it. I'm much more like, I'd rather somebody take a verse a chapter or maybe a book and get that instead of probably the idea of the church. The church is, and people have said this before, this isn't original to me, that too often, and this is one of the reasons that we even doing the 3D disciple, that, I mean, like the development, I was looking at that today, it's 8 chapters in that first section, you know, and the church can be accused of being a mile wide and an inch deep because there's so much there and we skim everything.
Yeah.
And I think we really need to, the whole idea of what we're hoping to accomplish is to be more of a mile deep and maybe only 3 feet wide, you know, kind of idea. So I think taking time, I think that's fine. I think that's maybe the way God works. It's God's timetable to do what he wants, when he wants, and how he wants.
Yeah.
Again, there's your control issue.
Yeah, I was about to say. I'm learning right now about control. Okay. So would you say something, would you say to someone, what would you say to someone who says that they're scared to go out and be uncomfortable about being in the land of discipleship?
Yep.
Oh, just be scared.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I get it, all right? You know, because we do read those Bibles and those stories in the Bible, right? You know, and we look what God asked these people to do, and they did. And so we read these stories, and we see all these crazy things they did, and I think we're like, well, if I give God control, is he going to do that to me? What's he going to ask of me? And so I think we're kind of, we know he's kind of, that's his MO. One of the things that really helped me and changed me, because I think if we ask people, do you want to experience God? Do you want to see God in your life? Do you want to feel God in your life? Do you want to see God show up in miraculous ways? Do you want to see the power of God and experience it? Most of us have an internal, like, yeah, I really want to see God do that. Well, Henry Blackaby wrote a devotional that's real popular called Experiencing God. And one of the things he says in that, kind of a paraphrase of that, is if you want to see God work, you have to get in a God-sized hole. And if all you ever do, if you only go as far as what you can handle, there's no need for God to show up because you can handle it. And so the only way to really experience God and see God's power and all that kind of stuff is you've got to go to a place where if God don't show up, it ain't getting done. And that's really the only way to get him, because if you're like, well, I'm only going to go as far as I can handle, then God's like, well, you got it. What do I need to show up for?
I'm getting anxiety just like thinking about the size of that hole. But I'm excited about it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and the good news is God is faithful and he shows up and you experience things that you never experienced, and we're joyful for that. I mean, you know, we all amaze at the missionaries. We all amaze at the people who've done these things, and they all feel blessed for it. And it's because they've gotten in a God-sized hole.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so page 27, I'm just going to pull up there, is the beginning of develop, and it defines what develop is. And just to quote that breakdown, you said, you defined it as the word develop recognizes this is a process. It also brings an idea of continuation. No matter where we are, we can develop further. So can we hit the trail before we've finished developing or not?
Well, no. I mean, it's, again, those links that develop, display, and deploy, all three of the links in the 3D, and pretty much everything we do as a disciple, it's all cyclical. It's you know, you start and you keep working on it, and you're just kind of going round and round and round in your development, you know, and so as you display God, as you think about displaying God in the world, well, that helps your development a different kind of way. That helps your deployment. As you deploy, you have to, okay, now I'm trusting God more, which helps you develop a greater trust for him, right? And so they all just play with each other.
Yeah.
And so it's all connected in some kind of way. We break it down just so we can have a sermon.
Yeah.
Because if I was to preach the whole thing.
We would be here till next year.
Yeah. You know, it wouldn't be a 7-hour sermon. This would be a 7-day sermon. You know, we'd have to stop for breaks here and there. So we just kind of break it down into digestible parts a little bit.
Yeah.
But each part relies on the other part, relies on the other part all the way around.
Yeah. It's sad because I just realized when I was preparing that question that I didn't even look at like the back of the manual that has the 3 rings intersecting each other.
Yeah.
That they all come together. So that's what it is. Are you ready to hit the trail running?
That brings us to the end of another episode of the 3D Disciple Podcast. Well done. You've taken another step into becoming an intentional disciple of Jesus, and that is no small feat. Don't forget, we really do want your questions. You can text us at 814-334-8426. We ask you to consider following the podcast. That way you can be notified every time a new episode drops. We invite you also to come and worship with us at 10:30 a.m. on Sundays. You can join us at our Main Street campus, which is in downtown Clarion, located between the Dunkin and McDonald's. Or you can find our online campus on all the platforms like YouTube or Facebook by just typing in FBC Clarion. You can find everything else you need at fbcclarion.com. All the links are found in the description below. I want to take just a moment to thank Hannah, our host today, as well as Brianna, our director-producer behind the scenes. We'll see you next time as we take another step into following Jesus.